Fish 20. Brahmana, the priesthood. The priesthood, defined. A priest, Brahmana, in Sanskrit, is defined as a man who promulgates teachings and performs rituals on behalf of a particular religious or metaphysical tradition. He should possess all saintly qualities, such as cleanliness, which is, as they say, next to godliness, peacefulness, austerity, intelligence, wisdom, renunciation, tolerance, patience, humility, and of course, moral uprightness and religiosity. This does not imply that a priest must possess those virtues to a perfect extent, but he ought to have each quality to at least a reasonably high degree. Even if a man seems to be a genuine priest superficially, if he is severely lacking in even one of the clerical qualities, he cannot rightly be called a priest. Therefore, a dumb cleric or a dirty cleric does not, by definition, exist. As explained in the previous chapter, priests, more precisely, world teachers, are the authoritative heads of society, thus virtue is paramount, so be wary of the multitude of phony priests in the world. N.B. In this chapter, and in this book, the terms priest, spiritual master, genuine, spiritual teacher, world teacher, guru, jagadguru, brahmana, avatara, avatar, prophet, clergy, and cleric, are fundamentally synonymous, for they all refer to those excruciatingly scarce men, who both possess the priestly qualities, and serve their communities in the role of teachers of metaphysics, religion and morality. The role of a priest. As noted in the previous chapter, priests constitute the leadership of humanity, and are responsible for its moral and spiritual development. It is crucial to note that a priest is not required to teach just anyone and everyone in his community. Traditionally, priests, at least those who are worthy of the designation, were commissioned to teach only two groups of males, the rulers of society, see the following chapter, vis the monarchy, and monastics, normally boys and or adolescents, known as Sisya, in Sanskrit, in his home school, Gurukulam, in Sanskrit. Furthermore, it is imperative that priests assess the qualifications of each prospective disciple, such as the boy's, man's level of intelligence, his sincerity, and humility, in order to ascertain his suitability as a student. As Lord Jesus Christ once so rightly suggested, one should desist giving what is holy to dogs, that is, those who are hostile to righteous precepts. Ultimately, the spiritual master is discerning which of his disciples will succeed him as the head of his teaching ministry. In other words, the teacher is hoping to find that young man amongst his pupils, who most fully embodies the aforementioned Brahminical, that is, priestly, attributes, so that his valuable lessons are not forever lost to humanity. A perfect analogy for why a priest should teach only the two aforementioned groups of males is with any world-class musician. Arguably the greatest pianist in history was Franz Liszt Ferenc, a Hungarian virtuoso, who lived in the 19th century. Quite coincidentally, Liszt became ordained in the Catholic Church in his 50s. Not only did Abbé Liszt tutor other concert pianists, but, just like priests, he did so at no monetary charge whatsoever. If he had taught novice musicians, he would have misused his valuable time, because his advanced students could have easily taught beginners, or could have taught even the teachers of those novices. Therefore, if one happens to witness a reputed priest who regularly instructs any group of persons other than the aforementioned two groups of males, it is absolutely certain that he is a fraud. What do priests teach? Contrary to popular understanding, the clergy not only teach religious studies, but all things obligatory for living a healthy and happy life, such as languages, history, basic mathematics, hygiene, diet, and most especially, ethics. If a particular student shows himself to not be inclined towards the life of a monastic, the guru will send him to another master, in order to be apprenticed in a different occupation, such as the military, business, engineering, medicine, accounting, laboring, etc. The modern system of schooling, in which every child is taught the same curriculum, and, invariably, indoctrinated into becoming a servile minion of the state, has been the source of much misery for society. As explained elsewhere in this, a final instruction sheet for humanity, a priest's disciples instruct, in turn, their own subordinates, including their wives and adult sons. It is not practical, or even possible, for a Brahmana to effectively teach every single individual in his community on a personal level, assuming, of course, that everybody in his community would actually want to study religion, yoga and law, dharma. Fortunately, there is a system in place where all citizens may benefit of the teaching of a true priest, see chapters 19 and 27, regarding societal hierarchies. Are prophets members of the priesthood? On occasion, God, or to be more precise, the impersonal self, acting via the preordained narrative of this universe, gives specific messages via chosen individuals, whether they be priests or not. However, such messages are usually intended to be spoken to an individual, or group of individuals, with specific, and invariably, temporal, repercussions for those individuals in question. This corresponds to the ancient lineage of prophetic figures found in monotheistic traditions. Such prophets can never replace a man who has evolved over millions of lifetimes to become a fully enlightened, saintly prophet, appointed to teach Dharma to humanity. Unfortunately, such world teachers incarnate very rarely on earth, and when they do appear, are often assassinated by the illegitimate rulers of their nations, or by other demonic elements of society. Even the most vile political leaders have a certain proportion of the populace who adores them. However, virtually everyone despises the gentle, humble, holy men who dare speak the truth about the state of contemporary society, and point out the multitude of extant sins. Genuine priests are extremely scarce. There are literally hundreds of thousands of individuals in this world who claim to be religious leaders, teachers, guru, in Sanskrit. Nearly all of them are either working class guys, businessmen, or women, acting under pretense. However, as mentioned in the chapter distinguishing enlightenment from liberation and awakening, chapter 17, a genuinely enlightened spiritual preceptor is very rare indeed. Even much of the teachings of universally recognized avatars, supposed incarnations of the divine, were far from accurate, what to speak of the precepts of lesser authorities. This lack of authentic spiritual guidance is the major reason for the decadent state of present-day society, and 2. Previous decadent societies, apart, perhaps, from the paucity of legitimate government leadership, see chapter 22 regarding illegitimate governances. One of the biggest misconceptions in this regard is that a monk, simply by virtue of shaving his scalp and wearing some kind of monastic robe, is automatically a spiritual master. As demonstrated within this chapter, as well as this entire treatise, an actual guru is not such a cheap thing. In actual fact, the typical monk, whether he be a member of a theistic tradition such as Christianity, or residing in an Eastern monastery such as a Buddhist or Taoist temple, is best looked upon as a spiritual seeker, or student of the religious life, who may one day become a spiritual master in his own right, though, again, this is hardly ever the case, since a genuine guru is rarer than hen's teeth. Furthermore, in my vast experience of residing in, and visiting, monasteries in a few countries, I can safely divulge that a certain percentage of monks, and especially nuns, joined their monastic orders purely as an escape from the harsh realities of modern life, and in order to gain free food and board for life. Bogus priests. So, to put it succinctly, there may be millions of so-called priests on earth at any given time, yet there are only an extremely small number of true sages who understand life definitively, and are both willing and able to lead others to self-realization, ADHYATMA-VIDYA, ATMA-JNANA, or BRAHMA-JNANA, in Sanskrit. As a general rule, the greater number of disciples following any particular teacher, the more perverse and corrupt are his teachings, because the truth is very difficult to accept. Unfortunately, the typical person wants to hear predominantly sentimental tenets, which confers him or her merely emotional solace. The current world teacher has never had a true disciple, sad to say. The necessity of a guru. Many spiritual seekers, especially in the more esoteric paths, mistakenly believe that they have need of a guru only until they have reached a certain level of enlightenment, or even that they have no need of a spiritual master at all. The main reason why every serious, male, religious practitioner, yogi, in Sanskrit, requires a teacher, is not so much to learn concepts, dogmas and rituals from his guru. The primary reason why a man needs a spiritual master is so that he has a superior to serve, lest he devotes his life to self-serving pursuits. When a man is bereft of regular guidance from a master, he is most likely to stray from the path of righteousness, dharma, in Sanskrit. This explains why even divine incarnations, avatara, in Sanskrit, acknowledge their own masters with great reverence, and rarely, if ever, contradict or disobey them. Of course, as adequately demonstrated in Chapter 07, there is no such phenomenon as an incarnation of divinity, but the point remains. Discarding one's master. It is perfectly permissible for a man to abandon his spiritual master in favor of a new guru, for any reason he chooses, but preferably because he has outgrown the dogmas and/or rituals taught by his former teacher. No genuine spiritual master will feel resentment towards another person for any reason whatsoever, including towards a former disciple who has forsaken him for a new priest. If this was not the case, then this author would still be attending a Protestant Christian church, thus believing a host of absurd, nonsensical, sentimental, dogmatic concepts. How do priests earn a living? A priest subsists entirely providentially, that is, he must depend solely on contributions from his disciples and pious well-wishers, unless, of course, he is able to support himself independently, by growing his own food and making his own clothing, both of which may consume an inordinate amount of time. Unfortunately, however, the former arrangement holds the distinct possibility of corrupting the teachings of the priest, since he may be reluctant to proclaim the bitter truth to his congregation, out of fear of them withholding their financial support from him. Ideally, priests, that is, genuine spiritual teachers, ought to devote every available moment of their precious time to ministering to their communities. There is no such thing as a part-time priest, as it is a vocation, not merely a job. Amusingly, numerous working-class men call themselves Brahmana, simply because one of their ancestors may have been a priest, something of a common occurrence in Bharata. Late in life, when a priest becomes a renounced, wandering mendicant monk, samnyasa, in Sanskrit, he normally assumes a new name, and should formally abandon any attachment to his family. Thus, his wife becomes his former wife, his children become his ex-children, etc. Priestly persecution. The most heinous action possible is to persecute a member of the priestly class of society, especially if that priest happens to be the current world teacher, Jagadguru, Visvaguru, or Sadguru, in Sanskrit. Thus, exterminating thousands of workers or business owners is less sinful than murdering a genuine priest, because when a prophet's mission is ended, or merely hampered by persecution, the whole of society suffers from lack of knowledge and direction. Only a truly wise person can understand the rationale for such a seemingly audacious statement. When the life of a world teacher is constantly threatened, or he is assassinated, as in the case of so many great prophets of the past, such as Lord Jesus Christ, society is likened to a chicken that runs directionless around the coop, shortly after it has been decapitated. Unfortunately, the more we progress into this current dark epoch, Kali Yuga, in Sanskrit, the more the heads of society, that is, priests, prophets, are being persecuted, and soon there will be hardly any actual priests remaining on the planet. At that point in time, the end of humanity is assured. One may possess an attractive body, have a beautiful wife, command a famous reputation, wealth as great as Mount Meru, made of pure gold. Yet, if the mind is not immersed in devotion to the lotus feet of the Guru, of what real use is all these? What use? What use? What use? Wife, wealth, son, grandson, and the like. House, nice relations, and born into a great family. But if the mind is not immersed in devotion to the lotus feet of the Guru, truly, what is the point of all of these opulent things? What's the point? What's the point? What's the point? Gurvastakam, verses 1 and 2, translated by the contemporary world teacher, Jagadguru Swami Vivekananda. Adi Sankarakaya. Indian spiritual master and former world teacher. The best thing a person can do is be in the presence of a spiritual master. The worst thing one can do is consider the master to be an ordinary person. Franklin Jones, aka Avatar Adi Da Samraj. American spiritual master. There is no God, and I am his prophet. Gurus are very clever at putting you down, but they're just trying to see how strong you are. They're testing you out, to see if they can hoodwink you. So long as they can, they're going to go on doing it till they get you to the point where they can't do it to you anymore. Then, you'll graduate. Professor Alan W. Watts, British-American philosopher.